Clement XI was Urbanate. Clement XI was a patron of the arts and of science. Giovanni Francesco Albani was born in 1649 in Urbino to the Albani family. He would serve as a papal prelate under Pope Alexander VIII and was appointed by Pope Innocent XII as the referendary of the Apostolic Signatura. Throughout this time, he also served as the governor of Rieti, Sabina, and Orvieto. Pope Alexander VIII elevated him to the cardinalate in 1690 and later ordained him to priesthood in September 1700. In 1703, he would hold a synod of Catholic bishops in northern Albania, which would ban locals' communion for their public profession of Islam. Despite being neutral in the French-Habsburg rivalry, he would eventually concede to Habsburg threats, and by the war's end, he would lose some of the Papal States' territories. Clement XI supported James Francis Edward Stuart, the exiled Stuart prince, by paying for his residence in Rome. He also performed the baptism of James' son, Charles Edward Stuart. He authorized expeditions which succeeded in rediscovering various ancient Christian writings and authorized excavations of the Roman catacombs. He made a concerted effort to acquire Christian manuscripts in Syriac from Egypt and other places in the Middle East. Clement XI died in Rome and was buried in the pavement of St. Peter's Basilica rather than in an ornate tomb like those of his predecessors. Innocent XIII was Polese, born as Michelangelo dei Conti, the same family which Popes Innocent III, Gregory IX, and Alexander IV hailed from. He was reform-oriented, and he imposed new standards of frugality, abolishing excessive spending. He took steps to end the practice of nepotism by issuing a decree which forbade his successors from granting land, offices, or income to any relatives. He would serve as governor of Ascoli, Campania, Maritima, and Viterbo from 1691 to 1695. Pope Innocent XII would make him Archbishop of Tarso, Osino, and Nuncio of both Switzerland and Portugal. His papal predecessor would make him a cardinal, where he would gain a strong disgust for the Jesuits. He would serve as Camerlengo of the Sacred College of Cardinals from 1716 to 1717, but resigned due to ill health in 1719. As Pope, he would assist the Venetians and Maltese against the Turks. He also supported James Francis Edward Stuart's claim to the English throne. Due to his lifetime of gluttony and laziness, he would suffer a hernia 3 to 4 months after he had been elected Pope. He suffered from kidney stones and lethargy, leading to his death and burial in St. Peter's Basilica. In 2005, upon the occasion of the 350 years since the birth of the late pontiff, the citizens in the late Pope's village of birth asked the Holy See to introduce the cause of beatification for Innocent XIII. Benedict XIII was Barese. He was born Pietro Francesco Orsini, a member of the Orsini of Rome. He was the third and last member of that family to become Pope. At 18, he would join the Dominican order, and by 22, he would be made priest, and the following year made cardinal priest by Pope Clement X. He remained a close friend of a local Carmelite mystic, the Venerable Serafina di Dio. Initially refusing to be elected as Pope, he was persuaded by Agustin Pippia, master of the Order of Preachers. Not a man of worldly matters, Benedict XIII made an effort to maintain his monastic lifestyle. He endeavored to put a stop to the decadent lifestyles of the Italian priesthood and of the cardinalate. In foreign relations, he struggled with both John V of Portugal and the Jansenists in France. He would suffer death from a catarrh, and at the autopsy, it was revealed that his heart was remarkably large. His process for beatification would first be opened in 1755, but would be stalled and reopened in 2004. In 2017, he would receive the title of Servant of God, which is the first step to possible canonization as a saint. Yet one must question, seeing that Teresa of Calcutta was made a saint in but 19 years after her death, does being made a saint today hold any value? Clement XII was Florentine. Born Lorenzo Corsini, he would presided over the growth of a surplus in the papal finances. He thus became known for the building and art projects. He was AAB of old Florentine nobility and a distant relative of St. Andrea Corsini. Corsini studied at the Jesuit Collegio Romano in Rome and also at the University of Pisa, where he earned a doctorate in both civil law and canon law. Using his knowledge, he would serve the papal state in various finical and legal ways prior to becoming pope. Elected pope at the age of 78 with failing eyesight, he is the oldest pope ever elected. He would not have the support of the Italian faction, but would be greatly supported by the French, Spanish, and German cardinals. Due to his predecessor's inability to confront the realities of the world, Clement would go about restoring the papal finances that had been plundered. He would go about rebuilding highways to Rome and repairing the art of the city. In his 1738 bull in Eminenti Apostolatus, he provides the first public papal condemnation of Freemasonry. He would also seek to mend the disagreements between the various rites of the Catholic Church. Though blind and bedridden, he would surround himself with the capable and conduct state affairs and receive envoys himself. He would die from complications from gout and be reburied in the Cappella Corsini of the Basilica of St. John Lateran. Benedict XIV was Bolognese. Born Prospero Lorenzo Lambertini, he was one of the best scholars to sit on the papal throne. He promoted scientific learning, the Baroque arts, reinvigoration of Thomism, and the study of the human form. Committed to the decrees of the Council of Trent and authentic Catholic teaching, he countered the growing atheism of the European courts. A head of state, he regulated taxes and promoted free trade within the papal states. A scholar, he created what is today a part the Vatican Museum. A polymath, he gave study to ancient literature, published ecclesiastical books and documents, human anatomy, art, and theology. Upon the advice of St. Leonard, the Pope was the first to institute the Via Crucis at the Colosseum, which he consecrated as a site of martyrdom for the early Christians. The Pope placed the Stations of the Cross in the arena. He would ban card games due to his own gambling problem. He would often use profanity, with many citing it as unfortunate phraseology. Despite his faults, he was jovial and was lucid until the very end. To those who knew him, his blue eyes seemed to sparkle with humor and cordiality. Loved and respected by all for his meritocratic nature and incorruptible virtue and intellect, he was one of the best of popes. His cracking down on the Jesuits is undoubtedly the only reason for his lack of renown today. He would die from a history of kidney problems and gout at the age of 83 and be buried in St. Peter's Basilica. Clement XIII was Venetian. Born Carlo della Torre di Rezzonico, he was a pro-Jesuit pope who would spend most of his reign attempting to and failing to keep the Jesuits from being expelled from France, the two Sicilies, Parma, Spain, and Portugal. The reason for the expulsion was due to the Jesuits attempting to outright create theocratic nations within the territories of the European powers, thus undermining the already established government's authority. His attempts to engage with Protestants would also prove to be a failure, as they only wished for him to capitulate to their demands. One such demand would enable the Hanoverians to become the kings of Great Britain, despite the long-standing alliance between Rome and the Catholic House of Stuart. When James Francis Edward Stuart died in 1766, Clement would refuse to recognize Charles Edward Stuart as his father's successor. Clement would actively ignore Cardinal Henry Benedict Stuart's objections. Due to Clement being driven into a corner for his unquestioned loyalty to the Jesuits, he would be forced to call a consistory, but on its eve would die in extreme pain and blood gurgling from his mouth. It has been suggested he had died of an aneurysm of a blood vessel located near the heart. He can best be described as an honest but misguided man, not unlike the popes after of the 20th and 21st centuries. Clement XIV was Santa Cangiolesi. At the time of his election, he was the only Franciscan friar in the College of Cardinals, having been a member of OFM Conventual. To date, he is the last pope to take the pontifical name of Clement upon his election. Born Giovanni Vincenzo Antonio Ganganelli, he would be elected to deal with the continued Jesuit problem that plagued the Catholic European monarchs. He would declare, after his friend and predecessor Pope Benedict XIV had appointed him to investigate, that the followers of the Talmud did not require the use of human blood for the baking of unleavened flatbread during Passover. He is suspected to have been poisoned to death. When his body was opened for the autopsy, the doctors ascribed his death to scorbutic and hemorrhoidal dispositions of long standing that were aggravated by excessive labor and the habit of provoking artificial perspiration even in the greatest heat. His neoclassical style tomb was designed and sculpted by Antonio Canova, and it is found in the Church of Santi Apostoli in Rome. He would be widely mourned by his subjects. Pius VI was Cessanate. Born Count Giovanni Angel Braschi, he would condemn the French Revolution and the suppression of the Gallican Church that resulted from it. Due to his moderate stance on the Jesuits, he would be unanimously elected. A consistent struggle Pius faced were the Enlightenment policies seeking to undermine the authority of the Church, particularly in Germany, where their archbishops continually sought greater independence from Rome. He would see the development of the Catholic Church in the United States of America, with the erection of the first American Episcopal See in 1789. Pius VI argued that the main thrust of the revolution was against the Catholic religion and Louis XVI himself. He also wrote that the French revolutionaries abolished the monarchy, the best of all governments. French troops commanded by Napoleon Bonaparte defeated the Papal army and occupied the Papal States in 1796. In 1798, upon his refusal to renounce his temporal power, Pius was taken prisoner and transported to France. He died 18 months later in Valence. His reign of over 2 decades is the 5th longest in papal history. Pius VI's body was embalmed, but was not buried until the 30th of January, 1800. By decree of Pope Pius XII in 1949, the remains of Pius VI were moved to the Chapel of the Madonna below St. Peter's in the Vatican grottos. His remains were placed in an ancient marble sarcophagus.